Hi, I'm Vivian, and I'm dying to tell you. Today I'm drinking a black stripe. It is a cocktail made with 4 ounces of dark rum, 1 tablespoon of molasses, 2 tablespoons of hot water, poured over crushed ice. It can be garnished with a lemon twist, which I am currently doing. The black stripe is an old cocktail and relates to today's story. So let's dive in. Boston is known for many things. Called the Cradle of Liberty, this old New England city has made the headlines countless times since its founding in 1630. One of the lesser-known times Boston made the news was on January 15th, 1919. That was when a tank holding 2.3 million gallons of molasses burst and flooded the surrounding area, destroying buildings, killing 21 people, and making the harbor smell molasses for decades. Arthur Percy Gell was born in Canada on 16 December 1878 to English and Irish parents in Ontario. In March of 1909, he immigrated to the United States through the Detroit port of entry. In 1910, he married Michigan native Mary Elizabeth Mason in Ontario. They moved to Cambridge, Massachusetts, and had their first daughter, Mary Elizabeth Gell, on 17 August 1918. Arthur Gell got a job first as a secretary and then as a treasurer for the Purity Distilling Company, a subsidiary of U.S. Industrial Alcohol, or USIA. USIA used molasses to produce alcohol. While some was turned into rum, over 80% was made into industrial alcohol, a key ingredient in explosives. The United States government, as well as foreign nations, were buying more and more industrial alcohol to build munitions for the militaries as the Great War, or World War I as we know it today, raged across Europe. In late 1914, Arthur Gell was tasked with overseeing the acquisition of a new tank to hold molasses. Molasses would be shipped up to Boston from the Caribbean on steamer ships, where it was held in a tank before being moved to the USIA plant in Cambridge by rail to be distilled into alcohol. With the demand for alcohol rising and USIA not wanting to miss out on profits, he was pressured to complete the project as quickly as he could. In trying to appease his superiors, Arthur took some shortcuts. Despite the tanks being 50 feet tall and 90 feet in diameter, he did not apply for building permits except for the foundation. When the tank was complete, instead of testing for leaks by filling the tank all the way up, he only filled the tank up 6 inches to save both time and money. On 31 December 1915, the first ship to use the tank arrived, filling the tank to 13 feet with molasses straight from Cuba. On 6 April 1917, the United States officially entered World War I. With our entry into the war, the U.S. government's demand for alcohol increased, and USIA stepped up production to meet that demand. The tank was filled up to 2 million gallons 7 times in 1918 alone. Fearing anti-war anarchists, Arthur Gell hired security and the Boston Police Department to protect the tank from sabotage. When the war ended, the USIA shifted more production to rum from industrial alcohol, keeping production up. On 13 January 1919, the Millero delivered 1.3 million gallons of molasses. This brought the tank level up to 2.3 million gallons, or 8.7 million liters, rising up to 48 feet 9 inches, or 14.86 meters, with a weight of 26 million pounds, or 11.8 million kilograms, the most it had ever held. For reference, a Toyota Corolla or a Honda Civic both weigh about 3,000 pounds. That is 766 Toyota Corollas or Honda Civics. Just to put it in perspective. On 15 January 1919, the day before the bill that would start Prohibition was signed, at approximately 12:30 p.m., the air was filled with a rumble, then a roar, then a clap followed by what sounded like a machine gun as the rivets ripped free. With the pressure of all the molasses warming and expanding from fermentation, the tank failed, sending a wave of molasses 25 feet or 7.6 meters high down the street at 35 miles per an hour or 56 kilometers per an hour. The molasses, being approximately 40% more dense than water, flattened buildings, toppled vehicles, destroyed the elevated rail track trestle, and covered everyone. The rail tracks had a streetcar on it that was tipped but landed back on the tracks safely and was able to stop before getting to the damaged portion of the tracks. It destroyed not only wooden homes but a brick firehouse. The only thing that remained of the tank was the foundation and the roof, the walls being flung in every direction with the molasses. The molasses was warm from the sun and fermentation and the recent shipment from the Caribbean, but quickly cooled as it came in contact with the cold ground, trapping people in it. Rescue vehicles responded but were unable to get close to the site the tanks were at due to the risk of getting stuck. Responders waded through molasses, searching through debris looking for survivors. Molasses was still knee-deep an hour after the tank exploded. Sailors and soldiers stationed on ships moored in port joined the police and firefighters in the rescue efforts, with hundreds of people volunteering. Clergy members also came to aid in the search and performed the final rites for the deceased. Horses at a nearby stable had to be put down as they were trapped in the molasses, unable to get up or clear the molasses from their nostrils. Haymarket Relief Station, a small local hospital about half a mile away, was used to triage and treat the victims. Doctors and nurses were swamped, literally, with patients covered in molasses. They had to first clean patients and remove their clothing before they could identify and treat them. Search efforts for the missing continued for days. The fire department started using hoses pumping salt water from the harbor to clear out the molasses. Acetylene torches were used to cut the pieces of metal from the tank into smaller pieces so they could be removed from the area. While hundreds of workers from the city and the construction company that built the foundation helped, USIA did not provide any workers to assist. The harbor was brown for months from all the molasses that was dumped into it. Molasses was tracked all through the city. It wasn't until May 12th that the 20th victim, Cesar Nicola, was pulled out of the harbor. On 11 December 1919, Stephen Clardy, the 21st and final victim of the molasses flood, died at the Boston State Hospital for the Insane, where he resided since he was pulled from the molasses. In addition to the 21 people who died during the flood, over 100 people were injured. Injuries ranged from missing teeth, broken bones, laceration, and severe bruising. People were slammed by the wave into buildings. Automobiles and train cars were slammed into people. People had molasses literally coming out of their ears, eyes, nose, hair, and everywhere else. Victims were often completely dark brown aside from the white bandages, contrasting against the molasses. They were being pulled out from under buildings and debris, where they survived only by finding air pockets in the molasses. Many victims were permanently disabled and lived with the pain for the rest of their lives. In addition to human casualties, horses, dogs, cats, and even pigs perished in the flood. All of this devastation happened right after World War I just ended and in the midst of the Spanish flu. Following the tank explosion, it was unclear as to what caused the tanks to fail. While the state chemist Walter Wedger claimed the tank failed due to structural weakness being unable to hold the weight and pressure from the molasses fermenting, USIA claimed the failure was due to sabotage of some sort by an outside entity. They denied any allegations that the tank was not structurally sound. Despite findings that the steel used in construction was too thin and an insufficient quantity of rivets was used, USIA claimed the tank was destroyed by dynamite from a saboteur. In August of 1919, USIA had 2 steamers en route disappear without a trace. USIA claimed that these ships were destroyed by anarchists, and the anarchists started their war with USIA by blowing up the tank in Boston. On the night of 14 September 1919, an incendiary device set a USIA manufacturing plant in Brooklyn that produced rum on fire, destroying it. USIA blamed this attack on anarchists once again. The tank leaked since the first time it was filled. Locals were known to collect molasses leaking from the tanks for home use. Arthur Gell had the seams caulked to stop the leaking, but it always started again. In August of 1918, the tank was painted brown in an attempt to hide the leaking. The tank was also known to vibrate and make strange noises. Arthur Gell, who oversaw the construction and operation of the tank, had no prior experience or education in anything other than financial and administrative work. Despite this, neither Arthur Gell nor USIA were found criminally guilty for the molasses flood of 1919 that left 21 people dead. In 1925, following one of the first class action lawsuits in Massachusetts, a judge recommended a settlement of $300,000 or $4,540,000 in today's money. USIA instead chose to settle outside of court, and the total settlement ended up being $628,000, or $9,505,000 in today's money. Arthur Gell was promoted to vice president of USIA and moved with his family to New York. Despite all the damage and lives lost, the parties responsible were hardly held accountable. The Boston harbor remained brown throughout the summer of 1919. Cleanup effort for the greater Boston area took years as workers tracked molasses into trains, automobiles, on streets, and into buildings. Phones, rails, handles were all sticky with molasses. The smell of molasses remained in the air for decades, especially on hot summer days. Some buildings that remain still have stains from the molasses. USIA did not rebuild the tank. Where it stood is now a public park with a baseball diamond over the top of the old foundation. 102 years later, there's hardly any evidence of what happened that fateful January day, 1919. The event that made national news has almost been forgotten. That is why I was just dying to tell you.